Coming up next is Miss Megha Bradley. Miss Megha, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Beautiful. Hey.
Hey, all right.
Well, let me introduce you, Miss Megha.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
I had an awesome session with Megha the other day. It was quite fun. It was called the Key Codes, was it?
Gene keys.
Gene keys. I got to fix that. Gene keys. I've never done the gene keys, anybody. If you've never done that, it's very, very unique. Blew me away. It takes astrology to another level. It takes human design to another level. And she's an expert. She uses her theta healing ability, her intuitiveness. She knows palm reading. She's such a gift. And I'm so glad you're participating with us, Megha. So let me introduce you.
Okay, thank you.
Megha's passion is helping people to transform their subconscious limitations, conditioning, and frustrating patterns of living that keeps them falling short of realizing the love, abundance, and success they were born to have. She uses a combination of science and intuition as a certified advanced data healer, hand analysis, and human design, and gene keys. She has a deep knowledge of spiritual laws, human biometrics, and psychology that she uses in her work. Her commitment as a healer is a result of healing immense childhood and generational trauma, as well as rebuilding her life after a near-death experience in 2014. So welcome, Megha. You got the floor for 30 minutes.
All right, fabulous. And I'm going to test my screen share capacity for a second. Do you know if I have it? No, I don't. I'll need it in a minute, not right this second. So
let's set that up for you.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and get started, and then at least that way we know. So thank you, everyone, and I am excited to share this incredible insight of human design. Out of curiosity, looking over at the chat room, if you've heard of human design or familiar with it, if you'll just say me over in the chat, that'll let me know at least whether it's something new to you or not. So human design is something that I had first received my first reading over, actually it was almost 7 years ago. And when I first understood what it had, I think it sort of overwhelmed me. And it's a very complex and deep science. And it is a science because it's not just, and I say just because I channel and I heal and I do all these things, but it's also a scientific aspect that has to do with something called the neutrinos. And originally, this all came onto the planet in 1987 when it was channeled in. And if you've ever had a human design reading and know how in-depth and complex the insights are, it is to know that these neutrinos, which are actually charged in the quantum physics universe, if you will, the scientists came behind the revelation of neutrinos and validated them. And now we're discovering that we have neutrinos like funneling out the top of the planet. And the reason this is important is because inside of the DNA, inside of your capacity to express yourself in order to navigate your relationships, to understand the path of least resistance and how you are manifesting your money, how you're manifesting every interaction that you're a part of. What you need to understand is that there is a blueprint, as you've heard, and we might just think, oh, there's a blueprint, but how do we find it? And I love science and the literal science of, somebody's got some background noise somewhere. The science of understanding that these DNA encryptions that you carry are not just from this life. They are from your past lives. They are from the universal collective associations, and they're all coming together in one. So that is to understand human design. We use the chakra system. We use Western astrology. We use the Enneagram system, the I Ching, and the Kabbalah. So this is and ultimately what we do is we take time, date, and birth information to create those charts. And the other thing to understand is there is the conscious design and the unconscious design. The unconscious design is, we oftentimes, and I think that the word woke or awakened is a little maybe overused in our spiritual vernacular. I find myself doing that, and other people who are like, what is, how do you know I'm awake or not awake? And the truth of the matter is there is a consciousness expansion that happens when we become more aligned and more aware of the innate design of who we are. And therefore, I'd like to think of that in that context when you hear those words. To say someone is awake or not awake is probably a judgment, unless obviously you have some insight to understand that it is an awakening to the alignment of self. And human design allows that to happen. And it allows it to happen through a process of deconditioning the DNA and the cells. And the deconditioning is that through the course of living your life, your parents raised you based on their design. And back when you were raised, to most of you on this call, human design wasn't even yet on the planet. So they definitely didn't have the science of human design. And many people have just sort of said, well, my parents raised me this way, so I'm raising you this way. Or society's already said X, Y, Z, so that's how we're going to do it. And obviously we are at a time in humanity, which is very exciting because we are beginning to question a lot of these stereotypical things that have always been that way. And that is part of the collective awakening. So the thing that I want to encourage you is to look at in your life, what are those statements? And if you have a journal, if you have a notebook that you're using for today's notes and seminars, go ahead and start to make a list of the always things. People, it's always this way. This is how we do it. And just notice how many of them are imprinted on you in your life and how many of them that you have blindly accepted because that's just the way it was. And there wasn't an alternative, or maybe you didn't have permission to ask differently. So that's the startup of human design. But I use human design to work with people, to help them to align with who they are, to forgive and to release the things that they should, oftentimes in the judgment zone, and also to forgive others. Because there's some sort of popping, I don't know who it is, but if you can, put yourself on mute. There's a lot of what happens, I think, for many of us is we literally go into often our 30s or our 40s, and then we kind of turn around and say, wait a minute, why have I always felt like I can't do this or I can't speak up? So I'm going to give you some examples of how human design plays out, and then I'm going to take some time to, let me test my screen share. Okay, good. We got that's what I wanted. I wanted to make sure. Okay. I'll come back to that in a minute, but my screen share is up and working. So I wanted to make sure that that was in place. So when we look at your design, there's two key things that you want to understand and to know and to make every choice from that place. And through that process, you begin to decondition yourself from those long-term responses and conditions. And the first is called your strategy, and the next is called your authority. And your strategy is like, for example, I'm a manifesting generator. And in a minute, I'm going to explain these 4 different archetypes because all of you fall into one of these. It will never change. There's no personal development course to take you out of your design. It's just a matter of falling in love with yourself. And so when you live inside of the strategy, it's how do you interact with the world out there and strategically do so that life is easier. You function with greater ease, greater balance, and greater alignment. And so that all of us who are here doing all of these different modalities of healing collectively are here to support you in awakening to that design in so many different ways and forms. And that's the beautiful thing about it. So your strategy is how do you navigate down the path. The other is your authority. That is sort of like, how do you use your reflexes to get down that path? So, it's like, do you run? Do you jog? Do you pause? Do you meditate? And so now to put a little more visual context around this, because I like to teach verbally and also visually, I am now going to shift to a screen sharing and go through some aspects of human design. And I'll try to leave about 5 minutes at the end. And of course, you can come see me in the room afterwards. So questions or anything, feel free to throw them over in the chat. I'm very familiar with Zoom. So I spend a good amount of my life in Zoom, so I'll look over in the chats in a few minutes. And let me just get the screen share set here. Sorry, My Jeopardy music. Okay. Can you see my screen? Somebody chat me that they see my screen. Where's the chat box? Make sure, since I just did a partial screen share. Anyone? Okay. Sheri, can you unmute and let me know if you see my screen, because I can't see the chat commentary.
We see your screen.
Fabulous, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so there's 4 different primary human design types, and if you come into my room, I will pull your chart for you. You can get it online for free as well. But obviously, if you come talk to me, I use it. This is a very broad knowledge. You'll get lost if all you do is go pull this chart. So this is what we call a body graph, and every single body graph is different. And there are 64 gates in the I Ching. There are 6 lines for every single gate. As you see on the screen here, if you're familiar with astrology, you see the signs on either side of the screen. And then you see a sort of like a chakra breakdown of the whole human body. And if we are thinking about the context of understanding this, what you are looking at is how the energy, imagining that your body is a circuit, a city lit up with tons of power and energy, that all of that energy has to flow in a certain way. And your energy is different than Sheri's energy. And my energy is different from my children's energy. And there are no 2 exact configurations, other than occasionally I do run into them in identical twins. So sometimes even a minute apart can make a difference in a design. And so therefore, it's different than looking at your fingerprints in your hands, which come in at 14 weeks in utero. And I'm not talking about that too much today, but your fingerprints actually are, no 2 people with 7 billion people have the same. So that is a different design. So this design shows how the energy navigates itself. So the first one that we're looking at here, I'm going to start with actually the rarest design. This is the design of the reflector. The reflector has to take in all kinds of receptive energy from everywhere around them, and only 1% of the planet is in the reflector category, and those reflectors have to wait a full lunar cycle before making a decision. That's their strategy. Their authority. They have no authority, which means they have to literally wait an entire month, 28-day cycle before they decide to make a decision. So if you have someone who's a reflector who is pushed to do something, they're probably going to make a poor decision or be influenced by other people's pressures when they shouldn't be. And the other thing about reflectors is they're able to see things and to feel and to perceive many things that the rest of us cannot. The next thing, I'm still hearing that popping. The next thing here is the generator. Actually, I'll do generator last. The manifester. Manifestors are approximately 9% of the planet, and they are oftentimes prone to anger if they don't live in their design. Manifestors are oftentimes they just tell you like it is, and they have great insight, great information, not really very much filter. But neither do they actually have the power and the energy to do everything themselves. Now, if you are a manifestor and you're trying to do it all yourself, you're going to find that you burn out your circuits really fast. But manifestors are fantastic in terms of being able to be visionaries and insight, giving lots of insight to people. So if you're a manifestor, you have a strategy of informing people that you're going to tell them something, or this is what you need to do. I'm going to inform you. I'm going to tell you what I think that needs to happen. That's the strategy for the manifestor. And so then in terms of the manifestor's authority, there's different types of authority, which I could spend an entire hour just talking about authorities. But from a manifestor's perspective, they need other people. They need other implementers in order to take those visions into reality. Otherwise, they get frustrated and angry. Specifically, they flash of anger. They tell you what they need to be done, and then you don't do it, and then they get mad. So understand that many times somebody may be mad at you, but they're really not mad at you. They're just, that's the way their energy projects itself. And if you understand that, whether it's you or you're receiving that from someone, you say, a point for forgiveness. The next group of people are projectors. Projectors make up approximately 20% of the population. Now, projectors are those who have, there tend to be natural born leaders, and they have a softer energy. And they will often find themselves being nosy and pushy. They'll come up and give you unsolicited advice, which is brilliant advice, but then it gets rejected. So the strategy for the projector is to wait to be invited. And when the projector waits to be invited, then they have an opportunity to bring forth their insight and their wisdom from a very different position than the strategy of trying to shove and push their way into something. Therefore, as an example of the frustration that goes with that are able to more easily flow through the position of leadership than many others. Barack Obama is an example of a projector energetically. A manifester, I hate to use this example, but it's one of the first ones that comes to mind, is Adolf Hitler. And he lived in his not design, right, in his not self. And projectors, again, natural born leaders, but when they're pulled forth and called forth. And finally, there are two, actually there's a hybrid, but I'll talk about it in a second, but everybody else, 65% of the planet falls inside of this group of people called generators. Now, we know that generators run the planet right now because all we have to do is go look out the window at traffic. Now, of course, COVID-19 has had the opportunity to slow the generators down, at least outside. Now, yet the generators have all gotten online, and now we're doing Zoom, and then we stay up really late at night. The generators are sort of the workhorse engine of the entire planet. And humanity at large evolves through different stages of who's the dominant energy. But at this time, it's the generators. And the generator's strategy is to wait to respond. But what generators often do is they shove their way into everything, and they push, and they come up with ideas that they shove into existence, but then they didn't vet them with anyone. And instead of waiting to respond to a need, to a question, or to an opportunity, a generator will wear themselves out and end up feeling frustrated, which is their not self. So every single design has a way to do it, strategy, and the not self, which is the what happens when you don't do it. And so this is sort of a high level overview. And inside of each of these, you see that there's different lines and gates, the red lines, the black lines. Red is something that's unconscious in the personality aspect, and black means it's conscious. The difference between the red and the black is that if you are unconscious, as you talk about somebody, and if you've ever said that has to be the most unconscious person in the world, well, that means that they tend to operate in this conditioning that was seeded into their cells 88 days prior to their birth, and they may not even know that they're acting that way. It just runs on autopilot in the background. Black means you notice it, you command it, and you use it more powerfully in everything that you do in your life. So this has kind of been an extremely high overview. If you've ever studied human design, you know it's a very complex and deep and powerful tool. I use it in combination with doing theta healing and ancestral healing to clear the contracts and agreements that we have come into, and then try to shove our human design inside of these boxes that have nothing to do with who we really are. So that's a brief part on that. So I think we've got roughly about 10 minutes. Right? I have 10 minutes left, right? You're on mute.
Yes, you do.
Okay. So if anybody who has a question, I guess if you want to just chat over in the sidebar. Otherwise, I'm now going to talk about the energy centers for the remaining time that I have. So I'll just pause for a second. Does anybody have a question? You can unmute yourself, or I'll just keep talking.
Give them a second to unmute if anybody wants to ask her a question. I find all of this so fascinating.
Yeah, I've been studying it for 3 years, and it's continuously amazing. My mentor is still studying it, so it's a constant evolution. Okay, so I'll return to the screen share.
Okay.
Out all of this, then what do you do with it, or what does the person do with it?
Well, it's about how you learn to respond to what's going on in your life based on what you have for knowledge and understanding. So let me find one of these designs to give us an example. I'm not going to use okay, so I'm going to use the manifestor here for a moment. This particular manifestor that's on my screen has, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell this person what to do. They may be called a know-it-all. And because they've been called a know-it-all since they were a little kid, they feel a lot of rejection. There's a natural resistance because each of these sort of, if you would think about arrows, some of these have receptive energy and some of these have a lot of pointy arrows. A manifestor, for example, has a lot of pointiness to them. That's why this kind of like anger, they're a little bristly. And what happens in the course of their life, and depending on what is going on in your life that's challenging, we look at your human design and say, how do we need to tweak your response to the thing that's in the external in order to unravel what's going on? So let's go back to this person. Let's say that this person says that they're a know-it-all. Why am I saying that? Their crown and their Anja third eye are colored in. They have a very defined, rigid, if there's a color, and it doesn't matter if it's brown, don't worry about the yellows and the browns and all that. If a gate or a center is colored in, it has more rigidity to it. It's harder to push up against this person and push them around, to tell them you should do this instead of that. They're going to be less influenced by the outside energies. This person is not influenced in the mind, but yet they will feel very ungrounded to the earth because this is a magnetic monopole that we're looking at from the crown all the way to the root. And so this is the crown. This is my crash course in human design. This is the crown. This is the third eye, if you're thinking about chakras. This is the throat chakra. The throat chakra, a lot of people have an open or an undefined. Undefined is that you've got a dot like this. You got a couple of dots on a gate, but you don't have it colored in, which means the energy is not as rigid for that particular center. And then you have completely open, which means this person has basically no energetic self-defense on that particular part of their energy field, and therefore they have to pause, gain more information, take more time to make a decision in each of these areas. So the throat chakra people have the ability to, the throat chakra folks can penetrate the aura of other people with their voice and be heard. But I have a client, for example, who has an undefined throat chakra, and as a result of that, she has, she actually started a business teaching people how to speak and get visible. She has spent her entire life having to struggle with the design aspect of herself that can't penetrate other people's auric field when she speaks. So she's had to learn ways to do it. And she actually builds off of business now and profits from teaching people how to get noticed because she spent her whole life doing it. So when you know what your design challenge is, you know how to use it because you don't ever rewire your design. This is innately in your DNA. It is the design of who you are. And there is therefore the power of learning to love yourself unconditionally, learning to forgive the judgments that other people have given to you because they are going by their design unconsciously against who you really are. So, so that's the throat chakra. The G center is this person is like, so nobody could push this person around from an energetic level of the heart energy. Some people are very receptive and empathic. This person's not necessarily gonna cry and weep at the sense of everything that's going on in the world. They're just gonna look at their relationship and go, this is my boundary. They have a very strong boundary line because of that G center energy. However, this person has absolutely no follow through, meaning that energetically, they start something and they probably have a lot of challenge finishing it. They start something and then there's really high momentum, and then 30, 60 days later, it wanes. Relationships, business, things like that. So when I'm looking with somebody who has, say, a undefined will, I have to tell them the way that they work with that is do short, measurable strategies versus long-term committed strategies. Because if there is someone who has, none of these people have a red, red definition, the red being colored in will. Every single one of these individuals can only go between 30 to 120 days before their energy just has to shift. They have to shuffle up the relationship. They can't sit on the couch and hang out for the next 10 years in the relationship. And when I work with people in relationships, we tell the same thing. It's like you need to come to the relationship and say, this is what I need. And so when you understand your design and you understand what you need, then you ask for it in a very different way when you're conscious of the need versus just feeling the resistance and the pressure because you can't articulate the understanding that you can't get it out of your mouth of why you need this. And that's a lot of the power that I think human design gives to each and every individual. And so I hope that helps answer like how we use it, how we apply it.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So the other part here is, so this is the will, and then this is the emotional center. And people who have this being white, if it's white, see this person here, this individual would have they get caught up in other people's emotions and would have to pause and ask themselves a very important question, which I oftentimes say, put your hand on your heart and close your eyes and get grounded into that energy flow and say, this is my emotion or it's someone else's emotion. And people who have an open or an undefined solar plexus are really left feeling emotionally tossed around. So it's really tough on them right now because we just look at everything that's going on the planet right now. These folks are having a tough go of it, especially this person. They have a completely open, they have no resistance. They've got tons of ideas. They're getting in all kinds of intuitive hits, and yet they're also feeling all the emotions. So these are all things that play into how this person is reacting. I have worked with people who have been borderline suicidal. Now, if I do work with someone like that, I have to get agreement with the person they're actually working with. But I have worked with people who felt like they are losing their mind. They just feel like they've lost it. And we do a human design session and they go, oh my gosh, this is what I needed to sort of take my power back. And that's why I love it. And that's why I think that if every single person could get tuned in, and that's why I said, whether you go search for human design online and learn it free, or you hire me, or whatever the case might be, human design, I think, is transformative for the entire planet. And since I'm running up on the end of my time, let me just point these other three out so I don't leave you hanging. There's the sacral center, which is like that gut feeling, the root, which is obviously makes you feel anchored and connected to the earth, and the splenic center, which is your goosebumps and spidey senses side. So those are the designs themselves. So I'll stop that. Again, tons of information, very little time. So in my room, if you come over, I'll tell you what you are. I'll pull up your chart. And obviously I am doing mini readings if you'd actually like to nail down an issue or a challenge, and we can do that. And I am giving away, for everybody that stops over to my room, I am giving away a raffle of a half an hour reading, a more in-depth reading, and that's normally $147. It's extremely insightful. There's amazing how much information I can give you just in a half an hour. So I have a Google form. If you come over and see me in my room, which is room 14, you can fill out the Google form real quick. And even if you don't have time to spend with me, I am going to be doing some upcoming trainings, group trainings. So if you're in there, then you'll at least have that information. So Audrey, I am available. If you just go to Facebook, that's probably one of the easiest places to get a hold of me. It's Megha, M-E-G-H-A, Success Page on Facebook. That's my business page. And also I'm obviously in the Facebook group for the group overall. And so I hope that this has given you a little tip of an iceberg if you've maybe been running up against something that's really challenging. And the parting thought that I want to leave you with is that we are just starting the gateway into 2027 which if you go Google human design in 2027, it talks about the mutation of humanity in the next 7 years. And we are currently up for an upgrade, the entire collective of humanity. So this will provide you some great insights. So thank you, Sheri, so much for this opportunity, and I hope to see you guys over in my room.
Thank you, Megha. That was great. Appreciate it. I would like to introduce some